The courthouse radiator was clinking like it had something to say, and I remember thinking that was about the only thing in that room willing to speak up for me. I was 68 years old, sitting at a scarred wooden table next to a lawyer I'd hired 3 weeks earlier, with money my son didn't know I had, and across the aisle was Garrett, my boy, my firstborn, looking like he already had the deed in his pocket. He'd worn the Navy suit, the one Hank bought him for his first real job. I noticed that and my stomach turned over. Then a small voice came from the bench behind me. "Your Honor, can I show you something my mom doesn't know about?" I turned around so fast my neck cracked. There was Theo, my 10-year-old grandson, standing up in his school clothes with his little drugstore smartwatch on his wrist and his chin trembling but his eyes steady. My daughter, Colleen, had a hand on his back and a look on her face like she didn't know whether to be proud or terrified. The judge, a silver-haired woman named Whitfield who'd been frowning at paperwork for 20 minutes, set down her pen. "And who might you be, young man?" "Theo, I'm her grandson. I have something on here you need to hear." Garrett's lawyer shot up out of his chair. "Your Honor, this is wildly inappropriate. The child isn't." "Sit down, counselor," Judge Whitfield said, not even looking at him. "Come on up, Theo." And when my grandson pressed that little screen and Garrett's voice filled the courtroom, I watched my son's face drain from pink to gray to white, like someone had pulled a plug somewhere inside him. I had never seen him afraid of anything in his whole life, not once. But I'm jumping to the end. Let me back up, because none of it will make sense unless you understand how a woman like me, careful, quiet, the kind who irons pillowcases, ended up in a county courthouse fighting her own son for the right to be considered sane. It started about 4 months after Hank died. My husband and I were married 43 years. He passed in the spring, sudden, a hard thing in the garage with the lawnmower half taken apart. I found him. I won't talk about that part. What I'll tell you is that for the first few months, I was no use to anybody, including myself. I'd open the refrigerator and forget why. I'd drive to the Kroger and sit in the parking lot. Grief does that. Anybody who's been through it knows it isn't a feeling so much as a fog, and you walk around inside it, bumping into the furniture of your own life. Garrett came around a lot in those first weeks, and at the time I was grateful. He was 44, a regional manager for a company that sold industrial flooring, the kind of job where he wore a lanyard and talked about moving units. He had a big house out in the new development by the highway, a wife named Brooke who I never could read, and 2 kids I only saw at Christmas. He'd show up in his work clothes and sit at my kitchen table and tell me he was just checking in. "You shouldn't be in this big house alone, Mom," he started saying. "It's not safe. The stairs, the driveway in winter." I told him I'd been climbing those stairs since 1981 and they hadn't killed me yet. He'd laugh, but it wasn't a real laugh. "I'm just saying, Dad would want me to look out for you." That phrase, "Dad would want," he used it like a crowbar. Every time he wanted to pry something loose, "Dad would want you to be sensible. Dad would want you to be sensible. Dad would want you to let me handle the money so you don't have to worry. Dad would want you closer to family." And I'd nod, because I was tired and foggy and he was my son, and a mother's instinct is to believe her child is on her side even when every hair on her arm is standing up. The house was paid off. That was the thing, see? Hank and I scrimped for 30 years and burned the mortgage in our 50s. We actually did that, lit the paper over the sink with a kitchen match and felt like royalty. So the house was worth real money now, a couple $100,000 at least, in a neighborhood that had gotten popular with young families. And there was Hank's life insurance, and his 401k that rolled over to me, and a little annuity. Not a fortune, but enough that I'd never have to ask anybody for anything for the rest of my life. Enough to be free. Garrett knew the numbers down to the dollar. He'd helped me with the paperwork after the funeral. He knew exactly what I had. By July, he'd brought me a brochure, glossy thing. A place called Brightwater Senior Living, 40 minutes away, near him. Studio apartments, vibrant community, pictures of silver-haired people doing watercolors and laughing at a card table like they'd just heard the funniest thing in the world. It's all inclusive, Mom. Meals, activities, nurses on call. You'd love it. And we could sell this place, take that stress right off your plate. And the money from the house? He didn't even blink. We'd set it up so it's managed for you, so you don't have to deal with all that. I'd take care of everything. I'd take care of everything. There it was again. My whole life, men had been taking care of everything, which is a polite way of saying deciding everything. My father took care of everything until I married Hank. And Hank, God love him, I miss him every single day. Hank took care of everything too. The checkbook was his. The car decisions were his. When I wanted to go back to playing organ at the church on Sundays, he said it didn't make sense. The practice took up half my Saturday. Who'd get his lunch? So I quit. I was the best organist that church ever had, and I quit because a sandwich. I'd spent 43 years being taken care of, and I had buried the only man who ever did it with love. I was not about to hand the keys to a son who looked at me and saw an asset. So I told Garrett no, politely. I said I appreciated his concern, but I was staying in my house and the money was mine and I'd be the one managing it, thank you. You'd have thought I'd slapped him. The visits changed after that. The warmth went out of them. He started showing up with a clipboard, asking me questions like he was running a test. What day is it, Mom? Who's the president? Did you take your pills? He'd move things, my reading glasses, the remote, and then watch me look for them and write something down. One time I caught him going through my mail. What are you doing? Just organizing your bills. You missed the water payment last month. I had not missed the water payment. I have never in my life missed a bill. I went and checked, and the canceled check was right there in the drawer. But he'd planted the seed, and the awful thing about a seed like that is it makes you doubt yourself. I started writing things down so I'd have proof. Then I'd see myself writing things down and think, my Lord, is this what a person with dementia does? He had me checking my own mind for cracks. My daughter saw it before I did. Colleen lived 20 minutes away with Theo. She'd been on her own since her marriage fell apart, working as a dental hygienist, raising that boy by herself and doing a beautiful job of it. She came by one Sunday and found me crying over a casserole because I couldn't remember if I put the salt in. Mom, what is going on with you? And it all came out, the brochure, the questions, the clipboard, the way Garrett looked at me now. Colleen got very quiet, which is how I know my daughter is angry. She set down her fork. He's doing it on purpose, she said. He's trying to make you feel crazy. He's my son. He's your son, who's 40 grand in debt on that house by the highway, Mom. Brooke told me. They're underwater. He doesn't want to help you. He wants what you have. I didn't want to believe it. What mother would? But once Colleen said it out loud, all those little moments lined up like dominoes, and I could see the whole pattern at once, and it made me sick to my stomach. I want to tell you I did something brave right then. I didn't. I cried, and I let my daughter make me tea, and I went home and lay awake all night, feeling like a fool. The brave part came slower, and it came because of a phone call I never should have heard. It was a Thursday. Theo was staying with me for the afternoon. Colleen had a long shift, and the sitter fell through. So the boy came to Mom's, which was just fine because Theo and I are two peas. He's a serious kid, asks 100 questions, the kind of child who reads the cereal box like it's a novel. He'd gotten one of those cheap smartwatches for his birthday, the kind that can record little voice memos, and he was obsessed with it. recording the dog, recording himself doing dinosaur facts, driving his mother up the wall. That afternoon, Garrett stopped by unannounced. He didn't know Theo was there. The boy was upstairs in the spare room I let him use as a fort. Garrett thought it was just me, and I made the mistake, when he started in on me again about the house, of saying I'd talked to a lawyer. That set him off. I went out to the porch to get away from his voice, and Garrett got on his phone right there in my kitchen, calling Brooke, I assume, and he didn't lower his voice because he thought he was alone with a foolish old woman who didn't matter. Upstairs, Theo heard the whole thing, and that boy, that 10-year-old boy, had the presence of mind to creep to the top of the stairs and hit record. I didn't know any of this at the time. I found out weeks later, in the worst possible way and then the best. What I did know was that 2 weeks after that Thursday, I got served papers. A sheriff's deputy came to my door on a Tuesday morning while I was still in my robe and handed me a thick envelope, and inside was a petition. My son was asking the county to declare me incapacitated and appoint him as my guardian and conservator. That's the legal word, conservator. It means the court takes away your right to make your own decisions and hands them to somebody else. Your money, your home, your medical care, where you live, all of it. Garrett was asking a judge to make me a ward of him. I sat down on the floor of my own front hallway, and I couldn't get up for a while. Attached to the petition were statements, sworn ones, from my neighbor across the street, Mr. Albright, who Hank used to play cards with. He swore I'd been wandering in my yard at night and seemed confused. From a woman down the block I barely knew, saying she'd found me at the mailboxes unable to remember my own address. And worst of all, a letter from a doctor. A doctor! Lindquist, who I had met exactly once at a wellness checkup, Garrett had insisted on driving me to, where the man asked me a few questions and shined a light in my eyes for 9 minutes. He'd written that based on his examination I showed signs consistent with early cognitive decline and may benefit from a structured care environment. 9 minutes. He sold me out in 9 minutes, and I bet you anything he never even billed it to anyone but Garrett. That was the day I stopped being foggy. Funny how rage burns the fog right off. I called Colleen, and Colleen called every lawyer in the county until she found me a good one, a woman named Ms. Mees. Reyes, sharp as a tack, mid-40s, who done elder law for 15 years and had seen this exact thing more times than she cared to count. I sat in her office, and she read the petition with her mouth getting tighter and tighter. "This is a hijacking," she said finally. "I'll be honest with you, ma'am. These cases scare me, because once a court appoints a guardian, it's very hard to undo. But the good news is, the burden's on him. He has to prove you're incapacitated by clear and convincing evidence, and one rushed letter from a doctor your son paid for is not that. We'll get you a real evaluation, a full one, from somebody independent. And if the judge believes him anyway?" She looked at me. "Then you'd lose your house, your accounts, your independence. He'd control all of it. So we're not going to let that happen." I got the real evaluation, 3 hours with an actual geriatric specialist at the university hospital. Every test they had. I scored higher than the doctor giving it to me, she joked. Cognitively intact, no impairment, sharp as a woman half my age. Ms. Minus. Reyes had that report ready for the hearing like a loaded gun. But here's what they don't tell you about these fights. The facts being on your side doesn't make you brave. The nights were the worst. I'd lie there in the bed Hank and I shared for 43 years, and I'd hear Garrett's voice in my head. "You missed the water bill. What day is it, Mom?" And I'd think, what if some part of him believes it? What if he's not even lying? What if he really thinks I'm slipping and this is how a son protects his mother? And then I'd think, what if I'm slipping and I'm the last to know? That's the cruelty of what he did. He didn't just attack me, he made me an unreliable witness in my own life. The hearing got scheduled for a cold morning in November. Colleen drove me. She tried to leave Theo at school, but he pitched a fit, said he needed to come, and Colleen, exhausted, frightened, not knowing what the boy had, finally said fine, he could sit quietly in the back, and that was that. I didn't think anything of it. I was too busy trying to keep my breakfast down. The courtroom was small and smelled like floor wax and old paper. Garrett was already there with his lawyer, a slick fellow named Castellano in a suit that cost more than my first car. Garrett wouldn't look at me. He kept his eyes on the table, jaw working. Brooke wasn't there. I noticed that too. Castellano went first, and he was good, I'll give him that. He painted me as a frail, grieving widow rattling around alone in a dangerous house, forgetful, vulnerable, prey to financial exploitation. And wasn't it lucky she had a devoted son willing to step in? He had the neighbor statements. He had Dr. Lindquist's letter. He had photographs of my house with a garden hose left out and a gutter that needed cleaning, like an unraked yard was proof of dementia. He said the word decline so many times it started to sound like a drumbeat. Then he said, "Your Honor, the petitioner only wants what any loving child would want to keep his mother safe." I felt Colleen's hand find mine under the table and squeeze hard enough to hurt. Ms. Reyes stood up and took it all apart. She put the university evaluation into evidence, clean, thorough, damning to their whole case. She pointed out that 2 of the 3 neighbor statements came from people who'd had Thanksgiving at Garrett's house. She noted that Dr. Lindquist's examination lasted 9 minutes and was arranged and paid for by the petitioner himself. She was methodical and merciless, and I started to feel, for the first time in months, like maybe the floor wasn't going to open up under me. But Judge Whitfield still looked troubled. That's the thing about these cases. Once dementia is in the air, it lingers. She kept glancing at me like she was looking for the cracks. And at one point she said gently, the most frightening words I'd heard all year. Given the conflicting medical opinions, the court may need to order its own independent evaluation and continue this matter with a temporary guardian appointed in the interim. A temporary guardian, meaning Garrett, meaning right now, meaning he'd have control of everything for months while they sorted it out. And once he had the keys, I knew in my bones I'd never get them back. I felt the whole thing slipping. Ms. Reyes started to object. Castellano started to smile. And that's when my grandson stood up in the back row and said, "Your Honor, can I show you something my mom doesn't know about?" Now you know where we are. Garrett's face going gray, Castellano on his feet hollering about it being inappropriate, the judge waving him down and calling Theo up to the front. That boy walked the length of that courtroom like it was the longest hallway in the world, his sneakers squeaking, and he handed his little watch to Ms. Reyes, who handed it up to the judge, and Theo said in his clear, serious voice, "That day, Grandpa Garrett came over. I was upstairs and he was talking on his phone and it was mean, so I recorded it. Because I record stuff. And I thought somebody should hear it." Judge Whitfield turned the volume up and set the watch on her desk, and Garrett's voice came out of it, tinny but unmistakable. "I don't care what some lawyer told her, she is not keeping that house. Do you understand the equity in that place? That's our retirement, Brooke. That's the highway loan gone. That's everything. I've got Lindquist on board. He'll put whatever I need in writing. The man owes me. Once the court names me conservator, it's done. I control the house. I control the accounts. I move her into Brightwater whether she likes it or not, and she signs whatever I put in front of her because legally she won't have a choice anymore." A pause. Then, lower, uglier. "No, she's not actually losing her marbles. That's not the point. The point is making it look that way long enough for a judge to sign off. She brought this on herself. She wants to play independent at her age. She can find out what independent really costs. By the time she figures out what happened, it'll be too late to do anything about it. The watch clicked off. You could have heard a pin drop on carpet. I had my hand over my mouth. Colleen was crying without making a sound, and Garrett was staring at his own son like the boy had grown a second head, like he couldn't comprehend that the kid he'd never bothered to learn the birthday of had just walked into a courtroom and ended him. Judge Whitfield's face had gone from troubled to something I'd only call wrath. She turned to Garrett very slowly. Mr. She used his last name, our last name, and she said it like it tasted bad. Did I just hear you, in your own voice, describe a plan to manufacture a false diagnosis and defraud this court in order to seize your mother's property? Castellano was whispering frantically in Garrett's ear. Garrett's mouth opened and closed. Your Honor, that was taken completely out of context. I was venting. I was upset. Out of context. The judge let those words hang there. You named the doctor. You described the scheme. You said, and I wrote it down, that she is not actually losing her marbles. There is no context that improved that, sir. There's more, Theo said quietly, scrolling on the watch with one finger. He came over another time too. When it was just Mom. He didn't know I came in the back because Mom dropped me off early. He played the second one, and this was the one that broke my heart, because it was Garrett talking to me, to my face, in my own kitchen, and I'd half convinced myself I'd imagined how bad it was. You're embarrassing yourself, Mom. A woman your age, alone, talking about lawyers and travel and God knows what. People are noticing. You leave the hose out, you forget things, you cry at the grocery store? Yeah, Mrs. Albright told me. You think you're handling this and you're not. And pretty soon, a judge is going to agree with me. And then you'll be at Brightwater where you belong and I'll handle the rest. Who do you think they'll believe? You, a sad old widow who can't keep her story straight? Or your son who's just trying to help? And then my own voice on that recording, small and shaking in a way that made me want to crawl under the table. I just want to be left alone, Garrett. I just want my life. And his answer, flat as a slammed door, you don't get a life. You get what I decide you get. The recording ended. I was shaking. Colleen had both arms around me. And up at the front, Theo just stood there holding his little watch, looking at me with those steady eyes. And he said, I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to be scared, Mom. But he was being mean and I knew it was a lie, so I kept it. In case. I have never in my life loved anyone the way I loved that child in that moment. Judge Whitfield took off her glasses. When she spoke again, her voice was controlled, which was somehow more frightening than yelling. Counselor Castellano, I'd strongly advise you to have a conversation with your client about the criminal exposure he's just created for himself on the record. This petition is denied, in full. The court finds no credible evidence of incapacity. To the contrary, the respondent appears entirely competent, and I'll note for the record she has conducted herself with more clarity than the petitioner has. She wasn't done. I'm entering a no-contact order. Mr. The last name again is to have no contact with the respondent, with Colleen, or with the minor child, pending further proceedings. I am referring this entire matter to the county prosecutor's office and to Adult Protective Services for investigation into attempted financial exploitation of an elder and conspiracy to commit fraud upon this court. And I will be sending Dr. Kaur Lindquist's letter to the State Medical Board with a note of my own. Garrett shot to his feet. Your Honor, please, she's my mother. Sit down. 3 words, ice cold. She is your mother. That's what makes this one of the more shameful things I've seen from this bench, and I've been here 19 years. You used a doctor's signature and a frightened 10-year-old's grandmother as a piggy bank. The only reason it didn't work is that your son has a better conscience than you do." She looked at Theo then, and her whole face changed. "Young man, do you understand what you did today? You protected your grandmother when the grown-ups couldn't. That took more courage than most people find in a lifetime. I hope your mother tells you that every day." Theo, my serious boy, just nodded like it was the most natural thing in the world. "She's my mom," he said, as if that explained everything. And I suppose it did. The actual end of it was quieter than you'd think. Garrett didn't go to prison. The prosecutor offered him a deal: restitution and a felony fraud plea knocked down to a misdemeanor, probation, and a permanent bar from ever serving as anyone's fiduciary. He lost his job when it made the local paper. A regional manager with a fraud conviction isn't worth much to a company that handles money. Brooke left him within the year. The house by the highway went into foreclosure after all. I didn't celebrate any of that. There's no version of watching your child fall that a mother enjoys. But I didn't lift a finger to catch him either. And I've made my peace with that. The medical board suspended Dr. Lindquist's license. Mr. Albright, my neighbor, tried to apologize over the back fence about 6 months later, and I let him talk, and then I told him Hank would have been ashamed to have known him, and I went back inside. That's the most revenge I had in me, and it was plenty. I kept the house. Of course I kept the house. I had the gutters fixed, and I planted a row of black-eyed Susans along the front where the photographers had taken their sad little pictures, and now in August, it's a wall of gold out there, and the young families on the block bring their toddlers by to look at it. That was almost 2 years ago now. I'm 70. I went back to the organ. Not the church. They'd filled my old spot. But the community college has a beautiful old pipe organ, and they were thrilled to have somebody who actually knew how to play it. I give a little recital every spring. Last May, I played a Bach piece that Hank used to hum without knowing the name of it, and I cried right there on the bench, and then I finished it anyway because I've learned you can do both. I took a trip to see the redwoods, alone, just me. And I stood under those trees that were old before this country was a country, and I felt about the right size for the first time in years. Colleen and Theo come for Sunday supper every week. Theo's 12 now, taller than me, still serious, still asking 100 questions. He says he wants to be a lawyer, wants to do the kind of work Ms. Reyes does, helping people who can't help themselves. I told him he'd be the best one the county ever saw, and I meant it. That little smartwatch is in a drawer in my dining room now. It doesn't even charge anymore. But I keep it, the way you keep the thing that mattered most on the worst day of your life. And sometimes I take it out and just hold it. People ask me, when the story comes up, whether I'm bitter about the 43 years of being taken care of into invisibility, about a son who tried to file the paperwork on the rest of my life, and the truth is, I'm not, because being bitter would mean still living back there, and I don't live back there anymore. I live in a house full of gold flowers and organ music, 20 minutes from a daughter who loves me, and a grandson who once stood up in a courtroom and refused to let the world call me crazy. I spent most of my life being told what I was allowed to want. It took a 10-year-old with a $5 watch to remind me that I was allowed to want it all back. And so I took it. Every last year I've got left, every Sunday, every Bach piece, every black-eyed Susan, it's mine now, finally, completely. I'm 70 years old. I'm a widow, and I'm not ashamed of being free. The thing I keep coming back to, even now, is how close it came to working. Garrett didn't fail because the universe protects good widows. He failed because of a chain he couldn't see all the way down. He chose to lie, and lies need other people to carry them. A doctor who'd sign anything, a neighbor who'd swear to anything, a clipboard full of notes. And every one of those links was a crack. He thought he was building a wall around me. He was really stacking up evidence against himself, one favor at a time. That's the part people miss about doing wrong quietly. It never stays quiet. It leaves a voice on a 10-year-old's watch. I used to think being a good person meant being agreeable. 43 years I confused the two. I made the breakfasts and quit the organ and let men decide things. And I called it being kind, when really I was just being afraid. What I learned in that courtroom is that decency isn't softness. Real decency is the spine to look at your own son and say, no, this is wrong, and refuse to fund it with your silence. Theo had that at 10. He heard something mean, he knew it was a lie, and he didn't shrug it off the way grown people learn to. He kept it. That boy taught me that the right thing and the easy thing almost never share a chair. And it wasn't enough just to be in the right. I had to be smart about it, get the real evaluation, hire Ms. Reyes, write down the dates, keep the canceled checks. Being innocent doesn't save you. Being prepared does. Garrett counted on me being too foggy and too trusting to fight back with paper of my own. The day I started thinking clearly instead of just feeling wronged was the day the floor stopped tilting under me. But the part I'm proudest of isn't the cleverness. It's that I got up off that hallway floor. The morning the deputy handed me those papers, I sat down and I genuinely did not believe I had another fight left in me. 68. Widowed, told by my own child that my mind was going. The temptation to just sign, to just go to Brightwater and let somebody else steer was enormous. Surrender is so comfortable. What I found out is that the strength to keep standing up doesn't arrive before the fight. It shows up while you're already swinging. So if you take anything from an old woman who almost lost everything to the person she trusted most, let it be this. Guard your goodness, but don't mistake it for being a doormat. Keep your wits sharp and your record sharper because the people who'd use you are counting on you not paying attention. And when the floor opens up, get up anyway. I'm 70 now, in a house full of organ music and gold flowers, and I am living proof that it is never ever too late to refuse to be made small.